Hey guys, so this is an overview of the features, setup and settings available in Newtonian. So Newtonian is a advanced system for falling and momentum damage that takes into account a number of things. There's two systems included. The simple falling damage system, which basically just measures how far a fall is and applies damage based on that, and then the Newtonian system, which takes into account the player's acceleration and momentum, and then works out how many g-forces the player is experiencing using the correct g-force formula, and then applies damage once they exceed that threshold. So I'll do a quick demo of the main system. So you can see here it's all multiplayer already, and we've got just a really simple level, and basically you just receive damage based on your fall. So the good thing about this is because it works with g-forces rather than just plain falling, things like water, so this is a physics volume with some water setup, that will actually cushion your fall, and you'll see that you almost don't receive any damage there because the water broke the fall. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple to demo, and it's also very simple to set up. So in order to add it to your system, all you need to do is drop this guy on your character or controller. As soon as that's done, everything will work as intended. So in the demo one here, you can see that there's nothing in here except for some controls, and one thing to switch between the two systems in the demo. And if we click on this here, you can see the settings for the system. So we've got a number of settings here, so I'll just go over them. So initialize on begin play. This is a setting used if you wanna have the system automatically initialize when you start up, then you just leave this on. In almost all instances, you're gonna leave this on. But if you did want to delay your startup or something like that, or your character was falling in a part of an in-game cutscene or something like that, you could turn this off and then initialize it yourself. The initialization delay is for when this is enabled, and basically that's to get around the game initializing. At the beginning of every game in Unreal Engine, it takes a couple of seconds for things to kind of just settle, and if you try and cast to a controller or to a character or anything like that, you'll end up with an invalid reference. So most of the time, because this is such a simple component, 0.5 seconds should be enough, but if you're noticing any issues in complicated projects, you might want to try increasing this. If you hover over, everything here's got some pretty detailed instructions and description on what they are. So this option here, use Newtonian health. The system includes a very simple health system, which you saw in action there, and that's just mainly for demonstration, but you could expand upon it and use it if you wanted. If this is not enabled, then Newtonian will automatically pass damage to the apply damage. So it's this one here, actor, and it will use a falling damage here. So in order to pass that to your character or controller, you would use the event on any damage. I think that's what it's called. Damage. No. What's it called? Event any damage. So Newtonian will pass through here, and then you use this and you can do whatever you want with it. So this will give you the amount, the damage type, which is the class here, and so on. So other settings we've got the testing frequency. This is how often it checks your character's falling or momentum changes. So the higher this is, the more accurate the results are going to be, but it will be use more performance. In general, you can probably leave this at 0.05, so it's doing it 20 times a second. If you're doing a parkour game or something where falling is really important to the game, then you might want to increase this to a higher number, something like 0.02 or 0.01. If you're doing a game where falling is really not that big a deal and you're not too worried about super accurate results, you could lower this down to 0.1 or something like that. In general, though, I'd say probably just leaving it at 0.05 is good enough. And we'll go over a couple of things in here to make that a bit more accurate anyway. So use simple falling damage. Like I said, it includes two systems. It includes this one here, the simple falling damage system, and then the Newtonian system, which is momentum based. So if this is enabled, it will use the simple one, and we'll cover the settings for that here. The damage rate, so this is how much damage will be applied for every every G-force over the G-force threshold, or every 100 units, which is a meter, fell above the safe fall height. So we'll come back to that again in a sec as well. And so you've got a couple of settings here for forcing damage to pawn and forcing damage to controller. So if you know exactly where you're putting your damage system, you can use this to force it. So if you were to put Newtonian on the controller, but you want to control the damage, like have the actual logic for the damage in the pawn, then you would force it to pawn and vice versa. If you hover over these, that'll give you a better description, and they're pretty. They make sense once you start looking at it. And then you can also set your falling damage. So if you didn't want to use the one included, you could make your own falling damage class. Now there are some more things down in these. These are not to be touched. They're just things used during the logic. So for the Newtonian health system, we've got the starting health, and we've got an automatic UI, and we've got an option to reset it after you take damage. So they're all pretty straightforward. Yeah, nothing really needs to be explained there. And then we've got the settings for the two systems. So for the simple falling damage system, the way it works is if you fall, let's use a simple visualization here. Let's say this is our ledge here. If your character is here and they walk off, the simple falling damage system will measure how far they've fallen from here to when they land. That's all it really does. If you jump up, it will not start measuring until you actually start falling, and that's using the Unreal Engine default movement states. Now this is fine for a lot of game types and is really simple and very performance friendly. Not that either systems are particularly performance heavy, but if you're looking to squeeze that tiny little bit extra optimization, then this is the way to go with simple games. So there's a couple of issues with that, which is if I was to use a jump pad and go up here, sometimes you can get some interesting results where you might receive damage here when you shouldn't have. And if you were to get slammed into a wall, then you won't receive damage based on that system either. Nevertheless, it is still adequate in a lot of instances. Now, your safe fall distance is how far you can fall before it starts to notice damage. So at the moment it's set 0, which means any damage you do receive, any fall you do have will receive damage. If I set that to 100, I'll only start receiving damage if my fall is at least 100 units or more. And the way that will work is for every meter over that amount, I will receive this much damage. So if we look at this and read over, it says if used simple falling damage is enabled, then this is expressed as a unit of damage per 100 units or 1 meter fell beyond the safe fall distance. So that's pretty straightforward. If you fall 2 meters past the safe fall distance, you're going to receive 20 damage in this case. We've got a full height offset buffer here. Now this is to take into account the test frequency. If you were to lower the test frequency down to 0.1, you would want to raise this slightly. The way it works is because you could fall... How do I explain this one? Because you could fall and land halfway through the next test frequency, so it might take you 0.02 seconds to finish your fall, and that means there would be 0.03 seconds left over. You're going to receive more damage than you should. As a result, there is this buffer here. It's a very spongy way to do things, like it's not going to be super accurate, but this is for the simple damage system. So you should only be using this system when you're not super worried about accuracy down to individual units of damage. So most cases 20 is going to be fine there. If you mess with this, then you want to change that there. So if you raise this value to a less accurate testing frequency, you want to increase the offset buffer and vice versa. And then finally we have the only setting for the advanced system, which is how many G-forces your character can withstand. And that's going to come down to testing. It's set up to be 15 by default, which will allow us fairly sizable fall, but not enough that it's getting super unrealistic. 15 is, when I did a bit of research, what most research seems to suggest the average human can withstand. But you get like fighter pilots can go up to like 45 and stuff like that. So you want to mess around with that. And if you're interested in how G-forces work, I'd recommend just looking up the physics. It's pretty simple to understand, but basically it works with just a change in acceleration. So if you are speeding towards a wall and you hit that wall, obviously your acceleration stops instantly, so you have a massive amount of G-forces that you are exposed to. And that's the way this works. And it works with jumping, it works with getting slammed into walls, it works with accelerating too fast. So if you were to get launched by something and you go too fast, and you will take damage, and that's as it is in real life. So that's Newtonian, guys. It's super simple to set up, and it just works. Like, it was everything was intended to be as simple as possible here, and yeah, there's no logic you need to set up except for your damage control logic and that. So that's it. If you have any questions or feedback, please leave comments in the comments below. And that's a lot. Thanks.